今天非常高兴大家能来参加我们这个第一届的我们六艺讲会那当然事实上我们有这样的一个活动，并不是第一次但是我们这次正式把它称为这个六艺讲会我们起名自中国古代，我们有所谓的六艺是指儒家讲的我们要具备一些知识分子要具备一些基本技能，叫做礼、乐、射、御、书、数好久没有讲这个了。但是我想这个是我们认为这是古代高等教育的学科的总称那也是我们每一个高等知识分子应该具备的。那这个也跟我们学校的我们师大的校徽一样我们师大校徽是这里没有看到我们有六个铎6个钟，那事实上也是像这个六艺那我们在这里要赋予这六艺新的一个意义那我们都知道，台湾师大到现在我们即将过70周年的校庆即将再过1年多，我们会有70周年的校庆。那事实上，我们从台湾这个高等在那时候叫高等学校的时代呢，从1922年开始，事实上我们到现在已经有92年的历史了92年历史。那我们以前当然都是以师资培育为主那在过去的差不多20年左右，我们已经转型成个综合性的大学那我们在研究上有相当不错的表现那教学上我们也不遑多让那各位都知道，我们现在在 QS 排名呢，我们已经在全球的差不多400名左右那在亚洲我们是排名第70名那在最近公布的全球的新兴的经济体里面我们台湾师大是排名第40名排名第40名，所以我们事实上我们表现也深获国际的一个肯定那在这一次的六艺的讲会，我们有4个面向那今天当然分别会进行，我就不再可以多说。那最主要我们今天请来的英属哥伦比亚大学的刚卸任的一位算是他的副校长副校长，事实上那其实他相当于我们学校的总务长教务长，因为他也负责整个在英属哥伦比亚的一个教学的一个这方面的事务那他今天会来跟我们分享有关同才观摩教学的这个机制这样其实跟我们互相做一点切磋分享。那事实上他也刚下这书，因为他已经过去担任了10年那其实他明年春天也会来我们师大在这里做我们的讲座教授，担任3个月那会有机会跟师大还要跟大家更进一步的分享他们在加拿大的一些大学的一个经验英属哥伦比亚大学在全球大概排名30几名左右在加拿大也是算是第2或是第3好的学校那在这里最后我要感谢我们陈校长，还有我们赵主任，还有我们的洪堂主任在辛苦的经营我们的教发中心我们希望师大的教学未来能够更进步谢谢各位。那我还是要讲几句英文让大家听所以我还是讲一下welcome, good morning, and welcome everybody to the 6 hours lecture. We call it 6 hours lecture. It's for the ancient Chinese to educate the intellectual people. And today's keynote speech, we are honored to have Dr. Anna Kindler with us. And Dr. Kindler is a well-known scholar and experienced administrator from University of British Columbia, Canada. She is a senior advisor to the provost and the vice president academic in UBC. Prior Prior to this position, she served as a Vice Provost and Associate Vice President Academic in UBC for 10 years. In addition to administrative positions, she is also a professor in the Department of Curriculum and Pedagogy. Dr. Kinder's topic today is about peer review of teaching. In Taiwan's higher education, or in Canada, I believe, research usually outbalances teaching. However, today, Dr. Kinder will try to tell us there is a way to balance teaching and research to peer review of teaching. So now let's welcome Dr. Kinder's speech.
Thank you very much, Vice President Wu. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my tremendous pleasure to be here today with you and to have a chance to address a topic that I think it's of great significance to education both in Canada as in Taiwan, and that's the issue of the peer review of teaching. I think I will come perhaps a little short of the expectation set out today in terms of trying to tell all our secrets on how we try to balance teaching and research. However, the peer review of teaching certainly is an instrument to help us highlight the importance of teaching and learning and demonstrate that there are ways in which we can assess it and we can use this assessment for improvement of quality of teaching and learning. Now, I apologize that I'm not able to deliver this presentation in Chinese, so please bear with me. I hope that the PowerPoint slides, which have been translated into Chinese, will help you follow through. But please, if you feel that I am speaking too fast, or that I have, stated something that you couldn't fully understand because of my inability to express it in Chinese, please wave. So that will be a signal for me to slow down and perhaps to rephrase what I have just said. What I will try to do today in this presentation is to, on the one hand, talk about some things that I believe are, if you will, generic principles or some of the generic ideas that have helped us develop our peer review of teaching. And then as I address each of them, I will try to show you an example, what this has meant at UBC and how we have applied, if you will, this principle in practice to change our processes. So let me start by pointing out to what I personally think are some of the minimum conditions, and I emphasize minimum because they are not necessarily sufficient to successfully implement educational change. But I think that, at least in my experience, in most of the circumstances where I was involved in trying to implement educational change, these points that you see here on the PowerPoint had to be met in some way or another in order for this change to successfully move through. So, as I will today focus specifically on peer review of teaching, I will try to focus on these categories of concerns and again try to explain what they mean in terms of, at least had meant for us, in terms of the peer review of teaching processes. Now, to help you sort of follow from the generic to the specific, you'll see that whenever you see a bamboo plant to the left, that's going to be more general, okay? And then when you see a picture of UBC, you'll know that I'm talking about specific implementation for UBC. Okay, so let me just start with one of those first principles for change. As we, when I first came into the office at UBC, into the provost office 10 years ago, we did not have a consistent university-wide policy or procedures for peer review of teaching. It does not mean that some departments did not try to do it or didn't use it and didn't develop some processes. But it certainly was not consistent. And the other thing that we've noticed was that the credibility and seriousness and thoroughness of the peer reviews was not necessarily at the standard that we would like to have at a world-class university. Particularly, and actually maybe I should ask a question, in your experience, do you have some form of peer review of teaching that's currently implemented, or it's something that you are just thinking about right now? No, not really. Okay, good. Because, it's in a sense, it's good because once you have some practices implemented, if these practices are not designed in ways that are rigorous and credible, they can actually sometimes do more bad than good. One of the observations that we had with our processes that were kind of ad hoc implemented here and there was that some of the peer reviews of teaching were done on the basis that, I'll ask you today to come, and evaluate me, and tomorrow I'll evaluate you. Well, it's not difficult to see that there is a certain degree of conflict of interest involved in this arrangement, right? It's hard to be completely objective and to be completely, rigorous in your assessment if what you say may in fact then affect your personal evaluation. So this is just a little example of, the kinds of issues that are embedded in peer review process. So we in a sense, we knew that we had a bit of a problem. We knew that we wanted to find some better ways to assess teaching and learning, but how to frame it, how to, set this exercise in ways that your colleagues, your community is going to welcome it or at least accept it and implement it. So one thing that was critically important for us was to set up this exercise not as a management, punishment, accountability exercise in a kind of a negative sense of those terms, but rather as an integral effort of institutional commitment to improve quality of teaching and learning at UBC. I think this is a critically important aspect of framing, because otherwise you're going to get a pushback from the get-go. The other point that I think was very important for us in persuading the community that it's a good thing, or at least that it's a concept not opposed to the values of the academia, was to point to our colleagues, to point out that in the realm of research, peer review is something that's generally accepted. It's something that we all, welcome. Peer review process for a review of articles in journals, peer reviews in terms of promotion of tenure where colleagues, assess others' research. So it's a part of university culture. So from that perspective, peer review of teaching is not a revolution. It's just an extension of the processes that we have embraced and welcomed all along in another sphere. The other important point to generate the buy-in and to frame this exercise was to say that, prior to us, if you will, regularizing peer reviews, student evaluations of teaching became pretty much the only systematic and very structured way for assessment of teaching. And I'm not sure if this is the same for you, but some of our colleagues have an issue with peer review of teaching. They say that this is only one perspective, and it's true. It is only one perspective. Peer reviews of student reviews of teaching are very, very important because they bring a valuable voice, but students are not always best positioned to assess all of the aspects of teaching, and also they come to it from a particular perspective. So for instance, faculty members who may be implementing a very significant innovation that challenges students' way of thinking about how teaching and learning is done may actually get lower evaluations, not because they are bad teachers, but because they are doing what they are supposed to do. You know, that they try to innovate, they try to enhance. So to create some balance to it, peer reviews are very, very important. So again, to say to colleagues, this actually will help bring another perspective. You know, in research, we like to triangulate data. In teaching and learning, we need to do so as well. And another point relates to what I've earlier said. You know, we wanted to have a more credible, more rigorous process that will underlie decision-making with respect to colleagues' promotion, their tenure, you know, any merit pay, you know, awards and so forth. We try to position this exercise as saying, you know, we don't want just to go by, you know, person's reputation or only student reviews. We want to make sure that our decisions about quality of your teaching are also informed by some other kind of evidence. So what I would say from this framing piece, the critically important part is to emphasize the consistency with academic principles and practices that are already widely valued. Okay, don't try, you know, not trying to present it as something totally foreign and in, you know, out of what colleagues have accepted. So in terms of framing, how did we do it at UBC? Remember that first point about the, you know, how this is part of a teaching and learning improvement. You know, we didn't go to our colleagues and just said, well, we believe in teaching and learning, you know, get better at your teaching. But we've invested, we've put some resources to try to raise the profile of teaching and learning at UBC. And some of the things that we have done was, you know, we've had the Carl Wyman Science Education Initiative introduced. It was a very robust effort to enhance quality of teaching and learning, specifically in science. I will not have time today to share with you details of it, but it's a very interesting initiative. You may want to check some more information about it on our UBC website under the Carl Wyman Initiative. Now, I already mentioned students' evaluations of teaching, and we have reformed that as well. We've done this before we moved with the peer review of teaching initiative to kind of say, well, we've been able to rigorize and to sort of improve a process in one realm. This is a logical next step for us to get this assessment piece completed. Another big initiative that we've done at UBC, and you know, I'm sorry I won't have time to describe it in detail, but it was a restructuring of our Center for Teaching, Learning and Technology to ensure that it's better positioned not only to help individual faculty members become better you know, in their practice, but that it also involves curricular and pedagogical decisions at department or program level. Now, we also made quite a significant effort to argue that we need assessment of teaching and learning both in a formative sense, you know, ongoing as a means to improve practice, but we also need it for summative purposes or for this administrative decision making, if you will, and that the rigor you know, needs to be there. But also that the formative piece is very important. So it's not that we just come and assess you, you know, and then make some decisions, but that there is a way to provide feedback and that the culture of assessment of teaching and learning becomes embedded in academic units. And finally, you know, and again, very important, saying we are doing this to have credible processes, to have processes that you as faculty members will you know, be able to understand and acknowledge. So timing. You know, as with any educational change, you know, when you implement it is as important on what you implement and how you implement. It has to fit with the entire picture, right? So as I said, you know, for example, we first completed the student review of teaching piece. This was a natural consequence, natural next step. The other point that I would emphasize is if you want to bring on an educational change, it often requires time if you want it to be implemented, you know, and embraced by the community. And at least in UBC, which is it's an institution that very much values a collegial culture, allowing enough time for consultation and engagement with the colleagues, allowing academics to provide some input into the process, and leaving sufficient degree of autonomy to academic units to fine-tune the instrument to fit their specific needs. As I said earlier, in our case, the timing paralleled some of those other initiatives, so it was all a concentrated effort on a larger scale. We also, and I think it's an important piece to keep in mind, we ensured that there was some capacity at an executive level to oversee that particular initiative. In our case, it was pretty easy to do because I was at the time in a position of vice provost. I'm a professor in education. Clearly, this area is within my general realm of expertise. So it was very easy for me in some way to support and lead some of these developments. And the other thing is, we acknowledged from the beginning, this is not going to happen, we come up with some rules today, tomorrow, the world is going to change. We acknowledge it's going to be a multi-year process, a process to consider, what some principles might be, a process to consider how they are going to work for a variety of units, and then the actual implementation phase, right? So, in terms of the process, I think the process is critically important to have a credible and implementable outcome, right? Clarity of the rationale and purpose why we are doing it sets a good stage for this being, broadly implemented. I put next point. I framed it as acknowledgement of sensitivities. In the world of academia, colleagues come with all sorts of, beliefs, sometimes even prejudices, and very often suspicion about the administrators and about the, management of the university. I'm not sure if it's the same here for you, but at UBC, even if you are an academic like me, a professor, but as soon as you become an administrator, you become them. Yesterday I was us. The next day I was them. So within the context of this, suspicion of management, one has to be very careful about these sensitivities, not to dismiss them because they are real, and engage with them in ways that allow us to move forward. Now, this third point about clarity of expectations of the process is critically important. And in a moment when I talk about the example, hopefully it's going to become more clear. But as we launched this process at the university-wide spectrum, we made it clear that the outcome of that particular exercise is not going to be a template, a piece of paper that everybody will take and use and put check marks in the check boxes. We've said what we expect through this university-wide process is to come up with principles that will then guide the implementation practices within each unit, as each unit may wish to customize some of it. Some of the practices for peer review in a school of music will be probably different than in a case of a department of biology, right? So we wanted to make sure from the get-go that it's not going to be kind of an oppressive central exercise, right? But that as a university we need to agree on the big framework. Inclusion is important. So it was not an exercise that the provost office itself kind of came up with. I went through a process that involved colleagues from all faculties at UBC, and it actually, maybe that was not very efficient process, I would agree, but in the end process that got us the buy-in that we needed, it took us almost a year to get everyone on board, on side, and saying, yeah, we can live with this. This is going to be good, right? So I already talked a little bit about the provision for both centralized and local decision making, right? The building of consensus, trying to make sure that in the end it's not imposed, but it's something that people kind of own, at least at some level of leadership across the university. And then again, the realistic estimation of the time required, right? That you don't rush too much. The credibility of the process, in my view, is critically important to the success of implementation. If people don't think that this process was credible, it's going to be very hard to implement the outcomes. I will try to very quickly, maybe go through some of these steps. The sponsor, if you will, for this exercise was the Provost Office. So there was a very clear signal that there is an institutional commitment to this, but deans were very much involved, from the get-go. I said, we have this issue to resolve. I'll need your help. I'll need your support to do it. And we've had a number of associate deans, then a number of very knowledgeable faculty members from across the university to join on a committee that was charged with coming up with these principles. First of all, we kind of had to be clear on this mandate, right? So to say, we are not going to go into details of every procedure, but we'll need to have a good enough sense of what these principles are. And we also spend some time talking of what we mean by peer review. Because often, and I wonder for you, when you hear peer review of teaching, people sometimes think someone coming to your classroom, sitting in the back of the room with a notepad, looking what's going on, taking observations, okay? You're taking some notes, and then making some statements about it. This is very useful data gathering exercise as a part of peer review of teaching, okay? But clearly, when you think about what teaching is more than just standing, or being with a group of students, right? It has to do with making curricular decisions. It has to do with making pedagogical decisions. It has to do with the ways in which you prepare for and you follow up on, your teaching. It has to do with what you do with the feedback that you receive from the students, okay, and how you use it for improvement. So we were very clear that what we meant by peer review of teaching was going to be more comprehensive than just, guidelines for people coming to the classroom and watching what others do. The other thing that we also considered is, in this peer review of teaching, is it going to be just one person who makes those decisions about, whether you are a good teacher or bad teacher or somewhere in between? We felt that there needs to be certain, more than one point of view introduced there. Engagement with the Senate. That was something that's probably more specific to us than what you would have here. At the University of British Columbia, the way we are structured for our quality assurance is that we have an academic senate, which is made out of mostly of elected academics, who make all of the decisions on academic, in terms of academic programs. It may surprise you, but Provost Office actually doesn't have any power to implement an academic program. We have a power of persuasion. We have a power to help fund certain things better than others, maybe. But ultimately, if the Senate says this program is not good academically, the provost or the president cannot override it. Okay, so there is a lot of power vested in the academic senate. So clearly, as I was trying to lead this peer review of teaching exercise, it was very important for me to connect with the Senate and to be sure that these guidelines, or that we'll come up with these principles, will be accepted by the academic senate because it is part of our quality assurance, mechanism. I will skip through some of the things, but perhaps I should say a couple words about the sort of identifying and resourcing local champions. critically important part for us was, how we're going to go from these principles that we have to actually a unit developing their own guidelines and implementing them. And we thought that if this is left out just to say, well, department will do it, nobody's going to do it, right? And department heads often have already so much to do that for them to be actively leading one more project of that magnitude would be very difficult. So we've asked the faculties to identify some local champions of this, people who are very respected professors, both in research and in teaching, okay, who are interested in this. And we have resourced centrally, we provided some money to the departments to allow for 2 years, up to 2 years of a teaching release for the person to really guide that effort within the faculty, right? The other thing that I will emphasize is this piece, establishing a community of practice. It's very difficult when you start something new, when you are asked to develop some processes and procedures, if you feel like you are alone on this, right? So we asked our Center for Teaching, Learning and Technology to become a kind of home for a community of practice. And the center organized opportunities for colleagues who were the local champions, to come together, to share, what they were learning within their units from their colleagues, and to fine-tune, to help each unit fine-tune their processes. In fact, this community of practice is an ongoing thing. So we have it now still active after the initial point. Very importantly, you have to signal, I think, from the start that these evaluations will matter, okay? And then demonstrate in practice how they matter, how they are used for improvement, and how they are used for decision-making about, people's academic careers.